Hey guys, look at this. Beef tips and rice. Now, this takes beef tips and rice right up to a whole new level. Let's add a little bit of beauty, whole lot of flavor. Wait till you try this one. You're going to be blown away. Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back. Hey, this is Texas Cooking Today, and today I'm going to be honoring the request of another YouTuber. Now, there's a YouTuber that wrote to me on one of my videos and asked me if I would produce some beef tips and rice. And I thought, you know, that's a very humble dish, and I think it would be wonderful for me to put out something like that. So I decided, hey, what the heck? This weekend, I'll make beef tips and rice. So just a couple of days ago, there's a YouTuber, his name is Failure to Communicate. He asked me to go ahead and produce this wonderful video, and that's what I'm going to do. So there you go, you have your shout out. Come over this way. Let's take a look at these fantastic ingredients that we have, and let's make this fantastic tasting and very humble and explosively delicious dish. Come on over. Get into all of our ingredients, let's go over the quantities. About 2 pounds of beef, 1/4 cup of Worcestershire sauce. We're going to be using about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of black pepper, and about the same on our salt. And on our mushrooms here, I didn't really get a weight on these, but what I have is just about 2 fistfuls, about that much in bulk. So I didn't even weigh this. I just grabbed them. I said, that looks about right for 2 pounds. 1 onion. You don't have to have a big onion for this, and you don't have to have a lot of onion. This is added for flavor, and so is the garlic, okay? We're going to be putting in anywhere around 2 to 3 tablespoons of minced garlic. As far as the wine, enough wine to completely cover it. So basically the better part of a bottle of wine. That's going to be our base liquid for this. And this is braising. Braising is when you're cooking in liquid. The temperatures are always low, so 250 degrees in liquid, bam, you're braising. You can do that in the oven, you can do it in a crock pot. This is a great crock pot dish. Let's get on with processing our beef. Now, of course, you know the name of the dish is beef tips and rice. And what is a beef tip? Well, you know, it probably originated with somebody wanting to use up remnants of meat, leftover bits and pieces. However, the way we do it these days is we simply take some beef and cut it into portions that'll make a nice bite size, okay? It doesn't have to be big, but don't make it too small either. Now what I want to do here, there's large chunks of fat here and there through this. A lot of time on meat like this, you can simply separate those muscles by pulling at it. Boom. That's all I'm going to do here is just separate these. Grain on this is running this way, okay? Running lengthwise like this, like this. So if I wanted to shorten that grain, I could cut this piece in half, just like this. And that's a neat way of doing that. It gives you a wonderful, wonderful texture. Sometimes you'll get a piece that's heavy with fat in it like this. Don't really worry about that too much. You can remove it if you want, but a lot of this is going to really cook down, so you don't have to sweat that. Beef tips. That's not too hard, is it? Remember, as I usually tell folks, when it comes to cutting board safety, remember your cutting board colors if you're using the color-coded system. You never put cooked meat on a red board. Only raw meat goes on a red board. That's for what it's for. It's for processing out raw red meat. That's the reason it's red. Hey, boy, that makes sense, doesn't it? And this is all part of a system that was set up a long time ago, what's called the National Sanitary Foundation. They set up a system of cutting board colors which protects you, the public, from restaurants and inexperienced cooks and chefs doing the wrong thing and making people sick. Because one thing you don't want to have done, you don't want a steak that is going to be served sliced, cut up on a board that had just processed raw meat like this. A cooked piece of meat, regardless of what it is, whether it's seafood, pork, chicken, red meat, or whatever, all of that stuff, every bit of it, goes on the brown board. Brown board is for cutting cooked meats. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful cuts of meat. You notice how I'm cutting those. Kind of on the bias. Right there. Well, that didn't take us long. There was a little bit more red meat on this, and that's what I'm going to get off of it. We'll save that sucker. There we go. Separate it from that connective tissue. And pretty much the bulk of what's left here, there's a little bit of red in there, but I'm not going to worry about saving that little tiny dab. That's all waste. Okay. So what we had there was, roughly 2 pounds of beef. And then, of course, I've extracted a few ounces here, but that's not a big deal. Roughly, that's what you're looking for. Okay, let's go ahead and prepare our vegetables for this dish. Now, as we always like to teach on this show, it is the setup method that we use. Now, setup method, what that is a simple method of preparing ingredients before cooking. So everything is all chopped, set up, ready to go. So when you start cooking, you can focus strictly on that, and you're not worried about having to cut something or whatever when you need to be focused on making sure something doesn't burn. Now, we're going to simply quarter this. Let me show you an easy way of doing that. You've seen me remove the ends in that paper, okay? When you're holding that knife, pinch it right back here, okay? Wrap your fingers around the blade and choke up on that handle a little bit, okay? This gives you better blade control so the knife doesn't rock like this too easily. On a knife that's wide this way, that is a real problem, so you want to be careful with it. When you're using your fingers around food in a knife, curl the fingertips. Don't hold your food like this. Curl them under so that this part of the knuckle is vertical. That way it can slide against the side of the knife. Isn't that practical? The thumb holds the back of the food. Okay, so this is called the crab technique, and it works like a charm. See how the fingers are curled under? I can't cut my fingertips when they're curled under. The thumb is behind. And to quarter this, all I have to do now is make some simple cross cuts. How easy is that? Huh? Now these are going to cook down almost to nothing. They're just going to be, they'll be in there, but they're not going to be a substantial, visible portion of what this dish is about. Go ahead and kind of break them up a little bit. There we go. Get them all up into this bowl. Now, if you're using your knife to scoop something, if you notice what I'm doing, edge is down. I can't cut my hand this way, okay? If that edge is against the board, you're safe. But if it's not, you'll slice yourself open. And remember, on curved knives, part of it isn't in contact with the board. Only part of it is. So be careful where you put your hand if you do that. That's something I would recommend for folks that have gotten really accustomed to their knives and been using them for decades, okay? For these mushrooms, simple enough. We're just going to be simply removing the bottom of that stem and making some simple cross cuts. Remember, this is a difficult thing to do sometimes. If you don't want to use the stem at all, hey, I get it. Some people just aren't into mushroom stems. They just want the cap. So, if you want to remove that stem, just pop it sideways. There you go. You got just the cap. Isn't that simple? So, I'm going to go ahead and slice all of these up that way. If you would, do the same thing. Are beautifully sliced up mushroom ready to go in that dish. Now, whatever kind of mushrooms you want to use is fine. You can use cremini, baby bella, white cap button mushrooms. That's fine either way. I'm using here some baby bellas. Now, the difference between a baby bella and a cremini, they're the same mushroom, okay? Cremini is the youngest version of a portobello mushroom. A baby bella is a portobello that hasn't matured and its cap opened up on the bottom. And then there's the portobello once they get bigger and they open up underneath on the gills, and that's your portobello mushroom. So, there's your difference. It's a difference of about a week and a half between a cremini and a baby bella. The next thing, we're going to be doing a little bit of garlic. So let me show you something. Garlic isn't hard to mess with. All I did is just push my thumb in the middle of that and it broke apart. Usually they will, not always. Give that clove a little light twist. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to flex the paper. And what that does is it just breaks it free from the clove. Okay, there's that scab on the end. Little twist. Boom, there we go. Okay, now here's your nice little tip about mincing garlic. You don't have to have a garlic press or anything, and those things are murder to clean out. What we need to do is to first cut that scab off of the end of your garlic. And I like to do that. You can use it, but frankly, I just think it's ugly as hell when I get some food and I see that in my food. It bothers me. So don't do it to your diners, okay? Don't do it to your house guests. Don't do it to your friends or family or yourself. Now, if I try to mince this, it's going to just bob and roll around on me. So I want to mash it, and that stops that problem from happening. All right? Now, I have my garlic cloves, and let me get this camera down just a little more, because I want to get right on this technique. This is a mincing technique that takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it down, it's a great way of doing garlic, okay? Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take the knife, we're going to rock it up and down just like this. Now, that's an exaggerated movement there, but that's what I'm going to be doing, and I'll be doing it pretty rapidly across this garlic. The finer it gets, the faster I can mince, okay? Thumb turned under, just like this, bam. Fingers on the back of the blade right up here, okay? All that's going to do is provide a spring-like action. Your fingers act as a slight compressor to bring it back down and to also kind of keep control on that blade. Now, if you'll notice how my hands are holding the handle back here, just like this. And what that does is it gives me the ability to move this quickly. You're going to want to grab it firmly. What's going to keep that blade from flopping around like this is the fact that you have your hand up here. This controls this movement. This controls this movement. Okay, so. Lost a little to my lower board. Now. can see, the larger pieces are going to kind of bob around on you. And as I said, as it gets smaller, you can speed up with it. One thing that you're going to need if you try this technique is a knife that is offset from its handle, meaning it has this right here. If the knife is narrow, it's not going to be able to do this technique. Okay, so you need a thick blade, or wide blade you might say, and a handle that's set high. I'm pushing that off of the blade. I push it away from the edge like so. You don't have to do that. You can just lay it flat and pull it that way to remove it off of your blade. There you have it, and that's a wonderful mince. You see, you don't have to have fancy equipment to do the job. You just need to learn how to use those knives. If you already know that technique, you're way ahead of the pack. And if you don't, that's a good one to learn. Okay, now it's time for us to go ahead and get this little goodie cooked up. You'll notice what I have here is a large pot. It isn't my largest stock pot, however, it is very, very sizable saucepan, big one. And you want to make sure that your saucepan is large enough so that when all of the meat is in it, it doesn't fill it more than halfway. If it does, your pan is a bit small, you need to go a little bit bigger, okay? So we don't want the meat to come up past the halfway point once it's completely full of it, okay? Because we're also going to be adding in some other ingredients, remember? When we're going to start this, I have more beef here than I can sear in a pan at one time. If I wanted to, I could do this in different pans, but frankly, I want a build-up crust in the bottom of this. That build-up crust is what we in cooking call a fond, and that fond is the development of complex, harmonious flavors. Okay, so it makes this dish wonderfully good. Now, all of the brown that we're going to cook onto the beef is going to end up washing back off. That doesn't hurt anything because it's in the pot where we want the flavor. Okay, this is a one-pot dish. So I'm going to start by heating this thing up. Then we're going to put some oil down in it and start cooking those up. Now, how do I know if my pan is hot enough to sear? Well, let me show you a simple test. Now we're going to take some water droplets. Okay, you see how it's sizzling off pretty quick? That means it's not hot enough. If it was hot enough, we would have water still right now skating around in the bottom of this. And what that's doing is it's forming a vapor barrier between the water droplet and the hot surface. And I need that kind of temperature to do good quality searing. Okay, so you can simply do the water droplet test. We're going to do that again. All right. We're getting a little bit of water dancing around in there. See that? That's a good thing. That means we're almost at the right temperature. So I'm going to give it just a moment more. I already know that water is starting to vaporize when it hits that surface. And that's a good thing. Now, I don't put my oil in there early. The thing about oil is if you heat it in the pan, it breaks down some of the protein structure in the oil that acts as a lubricant in the pan. And no, I didn't say fat, I said protein structure. Yes, oil has protein. And it is that which helps lubricate. Now, we're going to take some of this meat and get started searing it. I will not do all of this at once. And that's why I have the other bowl for. We have another bowl back here for the meat when it's done. Oh my God, that smells good. I love the smell of searing beef. Oh, it smells so good. The thing of it is once searing is complete, the meat will release. And see the brown coloring on this? That's what we're looking for, that nice brown color. And it's going to build up in the bottom of the pan also. So as you can see here, it's a very simple game. We're just going to brown the beef. Now, I'm not trying to cook this meat all the way through. Not at all. In fact, I kind of wanted a little red in the middle still, uncooked totally. Because the majority of the cooking is going to be done in the slow cook process. Keep doing yours the same way, and as soon as that's done, we'll get started on the next step. All right, guys, we have now finished searing our beef. And I'm getting exactly what I was telling you about. You see that brown in the bottom? That's what we're wanting, okay? We also have it on our meat. The next step of this, a little bit more oil. I'm going to put in that onion. We're going to pan sear it off until it's browning on the edges. That won't take long. Now the onion, again, that's not so much to add a hearty substance to this dish, but more to add just the flavor and a slight bite of sweetness. So what I have happening here right now is I have my onions, and let me swing you over just a little bit closer here. I have my onions cooking down in here, and they're going to develop this sweetness as they cook, just like an onion ring does. Now those onions, as they cook, they're also leaving behind some of that sugar on the bottom of the pan, and that becomes a part of the flavor of the whole thing. Now at this time you want to go ahead and get your oven on to 250 degrees if you're going to do this in the oven. If you're going to be using a crock pot, then what you're going to be doing after you cook up your beef and your onions in a pot like this, you're going to deglaze it with a little of the wine, and then you're going to take all of your ingredients and load them into your crock pot. Not the rice, of course, but you're going to put in your wine and the Worcestershire sauce and garlic and all that. So that's how you do the crock pot method. The exact same way as this, except after cooking the meat and onion on this method, you're going to wash out this pan with your wine and then put it in your crock pot. That's the only difference, okay? On this recipe, we do it in the pan. Now, that's because I teach braising. I actually own a crock pot, and it has received zero use. And people say to me, well, why don't you use that? That's a great way of cooking on the weekdays, and it really is. I just haven't got around to pulling it down because I love doing freshly cooked food when I get home, and I love inventing new dishes. So that's my time to do that. So now I have two odors in the air. This beautiful smell of pan-seared beef, which is just, that's heavenly. That's one of my favorites. But now the release of this onion that's caramelizing. Oh, and the smell that onions make when they do that. It reminds me of when I make French onion soup. I do much the same thing. Now I'm not trying to cook these down till they're soft or anything. I'm simply trying to get them brown on the edges, extract some of that flavor, darken the fond on the bottom of the pan, and get busy cooking this meal. While we're waiting on the onions to finish up, let's take a quick look on opening that bottle of wine. Now I'm going to show you this because there's not a lot of people that open a bottle of wine the way I do. What I like to do, this sleeve up here doesn't really do anything for you. It doesn't catch wine or anything like that, and it's always a pain in the rear. Just remove it. Take your knife and get it off of there. We're done with that, huh? Use this type of bottle opener. They're great. Shove that corkscrew down in there and pull down on this with this lever sitting on the back of your hand. So you get pressure on the cork, and that corkscrew goes into it easily at that point, you see? From there, finish running the corkscrew in, bring it out, and up. There we have it. The edges of the onions, getting that nice dark color on them, and that's just perfect. That's what I'm wanting right there. Now it's time for us to break loose some of that fond. Ha ha ha! Yeah! Don't worry, all of that's going to wash off the bottom as we continue to cook. Let's go ahead and get our beef in there. All that juice, yummy. Braising. What is braising? Braising is slow cooking in liquid. We've mentioned this, right? That means we need liquid. Yummy. Okay, we don't have to completely cover that meat, but you want the tips of the beef tips sticking out just a little. There we go, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? The liquid's already turning brown. Let's add in that Worcestershire sauce. Oh, yeah, flavor. I want about a teaspoon of salt to begin with, and about a teaspoon of black pepper. That's what I like about my grinder. This thing, God help me, it kicks it out fast. All right. It's down into the oven. Oh, hang on. I forgot one important ingredient. We cut up a bunch of garlic. Let's get that down in there. There we go. Yes. Now guess what, guys? This part of the cooking is really easy. You kind of go and kick back and relax. The first thing I'm going to do is on the stove, I'm going to bring it up to a boil. And what that does is it reduces the amount of time I'm going to have it either in a crock pot or in the oven. The mushrooms will not go in there until about the last hour of cooking, okay? Because I don't want them to just turn into mush on me. I don't want mushroom, okay? I want some nice, firm, beautiful mushrooms that look beautiful in the sauce, okay? They need to stand out. Now, if you've never cooked with red wine in this way, you've missed out. And this is one of the ways that a famous French dish is made, and it's called beef bourguignon. And believe me, it is mind-blowingly delicious. The rich, complex flavors, and this has very much of those same flavors in it. All right, it looks like that we are up to temperature. So I'm going to take this beautiful darling, turn off that stove, and put it right down in here in the oven. Well, that's it. In the oven, ready to go. Now this is my favorite part about braising, going and watching a movie. The rest of the stuff, don't worry about it. The rice we cook at the end, the mushrooms go in towards the end of cooking. That's hours from now, okay? This is a slow dish, remember? It's all about taking your time. See you on the other side. Hey guys, I've just pulled this out of the oven. I put a lid on it over the last hour. The first 2 hours I had it sitting open, and that was to let it reduce a little bit, let the sauce thicken some, and for it to become something greater than it already is. I'm going to take the little bit of wine that's left over here. We're just going to pour it down to a measuring cup that's almost, not quite, but almost a half a cup. And I'm going to add some water. There's a couple of different ways that we can thicken our gravy on this. Method number one is that we put some flour with water in there and bring it to a boil and let it thicken that way. Okay, that's one way. The other way is you can use cornstarch. Now, I like doing both ways. I have no specific preference one from the other. This time I chose cornstarch. So what I've done, we've added the wine and a little water to this pot right here. And I'm going to take a couple of heaping spoons, and that's probably somewhere between 3 and 4 tablespoons of starch, somewhere. And I'm just going to dissolve it in. Now be patient with this. It will all dissolve. So I'm going to pour this right down in here. Give it a bit of a stir. It's already starting to thicken just a little. Remember those mushrooms? Yay! Okay, let's get them down in there now. So this has been cooking for 3 hours. Guess what? Your piece of meat may take more or less time. Okay, it could be either way. You never know. So we've added a little liquid to this. That makes up some of that which evaporated. What I'm doing now, I'm getting liquid up on the fond that's formed on the side of the pan. Washing that off, because that's just pure flavor. I've tasted this, and it was wanting, okay? It needed a little bit of help. So we're gonna add in just a little bit of salt. Oh yeah, not a whole lot, about a half to 3/4 of a teaspoon. We're gonna add in some more of that Worcestershire sauce. Let me give this a good shake. This stuff does settle, so make sure you shake it really well. I'm gonna put in, roughly 3 tablespoons that was. I'm gonna put this back into the oven, and it's gonna be roughly, another 30 minutes in there, and that's gonna let those mushrooms cook in and become wonderful. Yet they're still gonna be firm enough and light enough to stand out. Plenty of extra pepper there. Yummy. Now while this is back in the oven, we're also gonna start the rice. I have a pan with 2 tablespoons of butter in the bottom of it. It's beginning to melt a little bit, sitting on the range here. I want to add just a little pinch of salt to this. Not a big deal. Put some flame underneath it. I'm going to want a medium-high flame. And I'm going to want 2 cups of hot water in that. There we go, 2 cups hot water. As soon as this comes to a boil, my rice goes in there. Now let me tell you something about cooking rice. Don't make it difficult. Do not, and I repeat, do not open and stir the pot, ever. Okay? Rice is finished when the steaming slows down and there will be a bunch of little tiny dimples in the surface of the rice. You never disturb it, you never stir it, you never mess with it. The rice that I am using here, if you'll notice, it's a not firm white rice. It's more like a tan colored rice. This is white basmati. And if you want to know the world's best rice, that's it right there. Guys, for goodness sake, please, once in your life, just once, try the basmati rice. That way you'll have a good reason never to buy plain white rice ever again. Once you've tasted it, you'll be like, oh wow, nuts to that. Basmati for me from now on. Okay, we're gonna bring this to a boil. We're gonna put the rice in there. Basmati cooks really, really quick. So this is gonna take, a few minutes to heat up. The rice takes about 12 minutes to cook when it's basmati. After that, bam, it's done. It has very little starch. It doesn't stick together. And it has this most wonderful, kind of an herb-like flavor. And that's gonna be great with those beef tips. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be delicious. Now guys, my water is just now coming up to a boil, and I'm gonna take this basmati and pour it in here. What I have was 1 cup of basmati rice there, and that's 2 cups of water. And that's sort of a universal measurement when it comes to rice, okay? When it comes to rice, it's always 2 to 1. 2 parts water, 1 part rice. When you do it this way, you're going to end up with a really superior product each and every time. Always do it on the stovetop. Some people use rice cookers, that's fine, but they work pretty much the exact same way. Now the real trick on cooking rice, put the rice in there after the water comes to a boil, bring it back to a boil, reduce it to a simmer and cover, and that's all there is to it. Like I said, basmati is usually 12 minutes on the cook. Sometimes as long as 15, but usually about 12. We'll cover it, reduce my flame to low, there we go, and let it finish doing its thing. Okay guys, now we have our mushrooms cooking in the beef back down in the oven. Oh, and it's thickening up also because of that cornstarch that we put in there. We added a little more wine, which is going to give it a slightly sweet quality to the back side of it. It's really neat to do it that way. Always reserve just a little bit for that purpose, or open another bottle. Never hurts. What the heck? You're going to need another bottle to pair perfectly with this dish anyway. That way your wine and your dish marry together, and it is just divine. Our rice has been finished up now. It is light, fluffy. Look at that. That's what I like about basmati. It doesn't have that sticky quality to it that so much rice does. Also the flavor, like I said, it has an herb-like flavor. It's just wonderful. If you haven't tried it, you've been shortchanging yourself. We just have to wait for the meat to finish. That's about another 20 minutes, for those mushrooms and the meat together. Also, I decided to add a few little items as a garnish, so think about what would make your beef tips and rice look pretty. Guys, we're ready to plate this up. And as I told you earlier, think about, toppings, garnishes, things like that. Let's face it, brown and white, that's not, well, completely appetizing, okay? Let's be real about this, okay? So, what we want to do is we want to introduce some color in addition to our brown and white. Now, the brown and white are the star of the show, right? They really are. These two things belong next to each other. Just a little more rice up in here. There we go. Now, don't plan on putting this on top of the rice. Now, I went ahead and added a little bit more of that cornstarch. And don't worry about what we get on the edge of the plate. That gets cleaned up here in just a little bit. However, let's face it, folks. This is a dish that's both eye-catching as well as delicious. Now, I want to get a few mushrooms up on top here. There we go, like that. There we go, a few more. That's the way we do it. Beef tips and rice. Let's clean it up, dress it up, make it beautiful. The reason I spend time on plating like this is because if the food looks ugly, it doesn't make it appetizing. Let's dress this little guy up. Now, the first thing I want, like I said before, I want some color. And I went ahead and I sliced up this wonderful little chili here. There we are. Isn't that beautiful? Just adds a little color to the top of it. I'm going to do the same thing with another one. I went a little crazy on this, but that's all right. It's going to fit up in there just as nice and just as beautiful. There we go. Doesn't hurt to put a few on top. Like I said, color. How about a little bit of these little grape tomatoes? Is it going to hurt to put some of those up in here? I don't think it will. You know, beef tips and rice doesn't have to be brown and white, right? It can be beautiful and bright and full of color. Let's take a little bit of green and put around on that. Now, I'm using cilantro. If you would like, just go on with some parsley, okay? Get some color in that dish. That's part of the beauty of cooking. It's artistry, not just for the tongue, not for the palate, but also for the eyes. Okay, there we go. Hey, you know, the neat thing about braising is there's no real effort in it, is there? Cook it all up, put it in a pot, let it heat all day. Just give it time, let it turn mellow. Look at this. The wonderful fruits of my labor. Oh, now this is beautiful. This is gorgeous. This is exactly what I think of when someone says beef tips and rice. I want something that is just filled with gravy. Now I'm gonna, with my fork, bite one of those big pieces in half. Look at that, it just fell apart. This dark, complex harmony of flavors. Oh man, I'm going to be going crazy about this dish in a little while because the flavors are explosive. so good, so rich, so full-bodied. The perfect meal going into a good fall. So I'll tell you what, give this one a try. You're gonna love this dish. And I would like to say thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking today. Hey, to my subscribers, to you guys, thank you. Thank you very much for subscribing. Cheers to you. And you folks, well, folks, have a good day. Goodbye. Hey guys, thank you for watching Texas Cooking today. Do appreciate it. If you would, please subscribe. If you like this, just click like down there, and if you would, I would really appreciate it if you add me to your favorites. Thank you.